All right, ladies and gentlemen, how are you today? Today we're going to be talking about obviously MAUVIKA. If you've watched my previous video, I have managed to obviously get her. I managed to get her weapon, and I actually was very lucky enough to be able to get her C2, which is something I am very happy about, something that I am very I'm very excited about the fact and about the future of my free-to-play account. But today I'm just going to obviously give you a run through of the character and what I understand from her from a very nutshell perspective. First of all, what I'd like to say is, if you have ever been in doubt of having an Archon character, then MAUVIKA is going to completely nullify that aspect, because she deals so much damage, right? And paired up with other Nutland characters, unfortunately, she deals way more damage. But it also comes hand in hand with the fact that she's able, now that we have that increase in reaction damage, she's able to pair very well with Citlali. Now obviously I will give you other units that you can use if you are not able to pull for Citlali, but if you watch my video, my previous video, I basically was able to save up for quite a long time, and I was very lucky with this pull to be able to get both C2 Citlali with her weapon and MAUVIKA C2 with her weapon without spending even a single dime of my own money, as you can see here. And the only thing I've ever spent on specifically is actually the Welking Moon. But with that said, I want to give you a run through of what generally I think of the character, what she does from a very general perspective, and what you guys obviously can comment. So obviously, first of all, her weapon, very good stat stick, gives a lot of crit damage, gives a lot of attack, and there is an increased 75%, which they don't actually mark up with yellow, but in actual sense, this, oh my god, can I just say, right, if you are going to summon between C1 and weapon, I'd say actually just get her and then get her weapon. It'll add on to her damage way more than usual, and it'll help way more in terms of what she's able to do as a character. But with that said, let me obviously let's talk about the artifacts. For the artifacts I've gone through, for the 4-piece Obsidian Codex, which basically gives a crit rate stat of 40%. Now obviously that pairs well with the fact that irrespective of her weapon only giving her 11%, the stats that she gets from her weapon after using her general skill and ultimate and general usage are way more in terms of the attribute you get. So an increase by this, you get about close to 80% crit rate if you are in this kind of level. So if you're around this 42 to 205, you end up getting about 80 to 220. Now in terms of her constellations, obviously I got her constellation 1 and 2, and what that do basically is that her constellation 1 just basically increases the amount of Night Soul points that she gets, but also it increases the amount of fighting spirit that you gain. And her fighting spirit is basically her ultimate, which is not the conventional ultimate of building up with skills and so on and so forth, or elemental orbs. What it is that you need mostly Nutland characters. You can use normal characters, but you need Nutland characters to build up that gauge as fast as possible to basically launch her ult. And then obviously when you have someone like her C2 basically increases her base attack by 200, but she also obviously increases, or decreases rather, the nearby opponent's defense by 20%, and then her normal and charged attacks basically have an increase by 60, 90 and 120% of her attack, which obviously is what you're mostly aiming for. Now in terms of her artifacts, obviously I was mostly focused on crit rate, crit damage. Fortunately, I mean, I could pop this on her and give us that extra 15.2%, which will put her at around 2,716, and this will now become 4, 5, 6, 7, about 79%. So I mean, it's really up to you whether you want what you want. Like in my case, 2,549, 42, 205. I mean, at the end of the day, probably this would be a better because of the attack, so I'll probably put this on her. Obviously, yeah, I'll just probably put this on her. And then obviously here I have crit rate, crit damage, mostly on 6.2, 13.2. I think I could do better, probably. There's probably some that are way better, but then, you know, you're mostly always focusing on that crit rate, crit damage stat. And then for here, I obviously put pure attack stat with some crit rate and 14%, and then here pyro damage bonus with some crit damage of 21%, and then her final piece was the crit damage piece here with attack and elemental mastery, HP and defense. But obviously it was mostly focused on the attack bit that was leveled up very well, so the attack 27.4%. Overall, this is the kit that I'm looking at. This is what she has, but even from that, her general amount of attack that she gets from the general basis when she's playing is around 3000. So in general, when you also looking at talents, what she does is basically her basic is a basic, but what I have noticed is that if you have her skill up, there is an increase in attack speed, which I have noted. It's not that apparent, but there is an increase in attack speed. So what her skill does is basically allows her to be a general sort of Raiden Mei, but with pyro and a shorter cooldown. Whereas with Raiden Mei, the whole aspect kind of goes on for a long, or rather her skill goes on for a very long time. With MAUVIKA, you do have to sort of apply it every other about like 5 to 6 seconds. But the good thing is when you do a whole rotation, by the time you come back to MAUVIKA, her skill is up and you can hit it back again. Now her bread and butter is basically her ultimate. I'm not going to read through everything, I'm just going to give you a general run through of what I've been through. So her ultimate, it doesn't build up with elemental orbs. What it does is in fact actually build up according to the amount of Natlan characters you have on the team, or rather fighting spirits, or rather just basically attacks, normal charge attacks, ultimates, skills. That's what builds up her ultimate. And you can actually launch her ultimate when it is past the halfway point of the charge amount, but there's a very big difference. If you launch her ultimate when it's fully maxed out, you do get the full aspect of full amount of damage that she can deal in one go. Now the way she works specifically is that it is way better for you to be able to do elemental reactions with her as opposed to just going full on pyro. Her whole bread and butter in terms of her kit and in terms of damage just comes from the fact that she has to be able to do an elemental reaction. Now that's where people like Citlali come in. Now irrespective of the fact that her constellation also decreases defense by 20%, her whole talent or her whole gimmick is to have at least a melt character or a cryo character who's able to enable her to melt. Now having Citlali is going to be way better because obviously of her pyro and cryo resistance shred, but generally the teams that you want to run with her kind of fall in towards having a Citlali. Now in this case, if I go to my party setup, you always just mostly want obviously Citlali with, if you don't have another Natlan character, you can always just go Citlali, MAUVIKA, obviously Kazuha and Bennett. But if you have some Natlan characters, yes, her fighting spirit does build up way faster than usual, but I would not recommend if you don't have the other geo buffer units, as Kachina is just more of her own kind of thing in terms of being a 4-star. Bennett will always be Bennett because Bennett is amazing, but in terms of the general kit or team that you want, this is the most optimal team if you get Citlali. If you already have a Kazuha, obviously mixing in a Kazuha on her team will be very beneficial. If you don't have a Citlali, then majority of the time you can always pop in maybe a Rosaria or a Chi-Chi or even Chong-Yun, or even in some cases a Diona, but mostly you want a melt character to be able to utilize what she's able to do, and in this case is basically hit that one big huge number that she's able to bring up at the end of her the team rotation. And the team rotation usually goes around being that you want Bennett to go first, and then you want to play Kazuha either with his ult and skill, and then you want to go Citlali all skill and then ult, and then by that time hopefully you've obviously built up all the fighting spirit with MAUVIKA, and by that moment you just hit her ult, hits around like 1.4 million, and you know what, it's able to clear out a lot of the content. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So just to give you a run through, I'm going to, obviously I think we've already built up everything in terms of hits. So what I'm going to show you how it actually works with MAUVIKA is that you always want to make sure, as you can see on the side there, that her fighting spirit is active, or rather completely full. And how the way you want to do it is that you have to make sure that you land Citlali's ultimate. So I'm gonna wait for him to do his thing here. Yeah, I'm gonna there, boom, boom.
You two, time to end them. Fulfill our pact. Pyroclastic surge.
1.7. So you always want to make sure that you ult with Citlali before you ult with MAUVIKA. That gives MAUVIKA that big PP damage of being able to deal about 1.7, 1.6, 1.5, 1.3. It just deals so much damage and it helps you do so much. I'm not going to ult with Kazuha. I'm simply going to obviously skill with him, and then I'm going to obviously, but first I'm going to Bennett, or rather MAUVIKA skill, Bennett skill. So the combo is MAUVIKA skill, Bennett ult, Kazuha skill, and then Citlali ult and skill, and then MAUVIKA. So a good example is, let's say, boom, and then boom, boom, boom,
Get to work. Eat Papa. Get him.
and then MAUVIKA. 1.4 easy. And so you just skill in terms instead of ulting with Kazuha specifically.
Strike dead. Teamwork is
skill.
work. Wind strike. Suffer the wrath of the Eastly. Fulfill our wrath from the sky.
Done. Obviously I don't know how much that hits, but that was definitely about 1 million. She went behind me, but that was about 1 million worth of damage. And I don't know what it is with Kazuha that for some reason you're not able to get the full amount of damage impact from using his ults. It's weird because you'd rather just use his skill and then go to the Citlali MAUVIKA combo. It's something I've noticed. It's not really bad, but it's something that I've noticed. So if you're going to build this team, I would say do not ult with Kazuha, just basically skill with him, and then that's pretty much it. So the only thing now we can kind of test out is probably Abyss, something. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have a good day. If you have any questions, I will see you in the next one.